Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point.
What is good, everybody? Welcome back to the Puncher's Point. We got a prediction episode for y'all, and let me tell you something about this prediction episode. Unlike Naoya Inoue versus Jae Kim, this is an actual tough prediction. And on top of that, the stakes for a non-world title fight, pretty big. We got David Benavidez versus David Morrell, February 1st, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, you might be asking, well, why are the stakes so big if there's no world title on the line for this fight? And the reason why is because, according to Turki Al Sheikh, now again, he's not like the ruler of boxing, but he can make some incredible fights, as we have seen. He said that he wants the winner of this fight to face the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol for the undisputed light heavyweight championship. And that is a pretty big deal. So, with that being said, we're going to get right to it with the strengths and the weaknesses for both fighters. We are going to start with David Benavidez. Now, the one thing about David Benavidez I can say is super aggressive. I mean, this guy imposes his will on everybody. And I'm not gonna lie to you, the way David Benavidez fights, it is absolutely insane how aggressive and how much pressure. And it's almost like you can see the opponents getting broken down, and you can see them basically just fighting to survive every single fight. It might not start that way, but let me tell you something, as the fight progresses, he turns into an actual monster. He fights very similar to Beterbiev in the sense of he continuously tortures you and punishes you throughout the round. And as the rounds go on, it just gets even more grueling for his opponents to even withstand it. Now, the other thing about David Benavidez, if we're going to get a little more technical, I think I think David Benavidez has a very, very good right uppercut. I think when he lands that uppercut, it is a thing of beauty. The other thing about him is he has fast hand speed. When David Benavidez gets going, there is no slowing him down. There is no stopping him. When he flips that switch on, he don't turn it off. And that is the thing. Once he starts building momentum against his opponents, it's really, really hard for them to even get that momentum back. Because once he gets on a roll, he don't stop. And that hand speed, once he starts getting his accuracy down, that hand speed is incredible. Once he realizes that his opponent can't fight fire with fire, that hand speed just takes over. And honestly, once that hand speed gets going, once that accuracy starts landing, once that power in both of his hands start producing, it's game over for all of his opponents. I mean, the guy is 29-0 with 24 knockouts. He ain't no slouch. And a lot of these guys who went the distance against David Benavidez, credit to y'all because I don't know how y'all are doing it. His shots are literally gunshots. His punches are gunshots, and it's absolutely insane. Grueling body puncher, grueling body puncher. When he starts getting to that body, I mean, those body punches, I mean, you could hear him, and I mean, it is absolutely insane. Now, I know it seems like I'm really kind of hyping him up, but trust me when I tell you there are some weaknesses with Benavidez, but we're going to get to the strengths first. And these are the strengths that I have for David Benavidez. He really loves his hooks. And overall, I really do think those hooks, left or right, it don't matter. I really do think that once they land, his opponents are in extreme danger. Once those hooks start landing, I think that's when his opponents start realizing like we can't just come in here and fight fire with fire. It's going to be really, really hard. And a lot of guys who are boxers and punchers have felt that wrath from his hooks. Now, you might be asking, well, what are the weaknesses? In my opinion, he lacks a jab. Not saying he doesn't have one, but he lacks it. I feel like there's some fights where I don't see him use the jab. Actually, there's most fights where I really don't see him use the jab. And I feel like in certain fights, he's going to have to use that jab. But I feel like there's sometimes he relies a little bit too much on his power and not enough on boxing ability in itself. Head movement getting better, but I wouldn't say it's a strength. I mean, in his early fights, he didn't use that much head movement. Now you kind of see him start progressing that head movement a little bit more. And the one thing I can say about David Benavidez is he's always improving. Every single fight, he's always progressing. I'm not gonna lie to you. Even though in the Vosdick fight, a lot of people were complaining about how his power didn't translate to 175, his boxing ability definitely did. I think he looked the most polished against Vosdick. in that fight. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's an off fight for him." Not every fight he's gonna win by knockout. I mean, credit to Gvozdyk for sticking in the ring with him, but in my opinion, I feel like at 175 he's looked a lot more polished as a boxer. So I will say that his boxing ability is improving. His head movement is improving, but I still wouldn't call it a strength. I would still say that's one of the weaknesses in his arsenal. He lacks power at 175, like I mentioned. Now the question is, did Gvozdyk have so much heart and did he just have the will to survive? Or is David Benavidez' power really not translating to 175? And that's the question we got to ask ourselves because Gvozdyk in his prime went up against Beterbiev, and Beterbiev completely like annihilated him. He completely annihilated him. So the question is, can David Benavidez' power translate to 175? And I don't think that question is going to be answered in this fight because both of these guys have only had one fight at 175 pounds. So let's suppose hypothetically Benavidez goes in there and destroys Morell. I don't think that proves it. I think I would have to see Benavidez against a true 175 pounder, if that makes any sense. Somebody like a Bivol or a Beterbiev. Somebody like if I really had to take a guess and think, somebody like Marcus Brown, or somebody who's Joe Smith, somebody who's a legit 175 pounder. Put it that way. He still drops his hands. That's the one thing I will say about Benavidez. He drops his hands, especially when he's going for body shots. He's been dropped in his career, and a lot of people completely forgot about that. He's been dropped in his career, and if you go back and you watch when he got dropped, it was because he was reaching in for a body punch and he dropped his hands, and the guy hit him with a check hook. So overall, I do feel like he still drops his hands, and I still feel like there's some boxing fundamentals that David Benavidez doesn't have down completely. But God, does his hand speed, does his power make up for it? Now, as far as his opponent, David Morrell, well, David Morrell, 11 and 0, 9 knockouts. I mean, David Morrell is on a roll, and I truly believe that David Morrell is a dog, and we're going to see that proof in this fight. However, it's no secret that David Morrell is not battle tested. I mean, all of his opponents that he fought, they all of them put together don't even equal what David Benavidez is. So overall, let's go over David Morrell's strengths and weaknesses as well. So for David Morrell, he has a very, very nice left hand, especially his overhand left. I would say that's his biggest weapon. And I feel like there's a lot of guys that he's hit with that overhand left, and a lot of guys have fallen from that punch itself. He has quick footwork. The one thing I can say about David Morrell that he has that Benavidez doesn't is David Morrell is very, very good at cutting angles and using his footwork. David Morrell, he could land a good 4 or 5 punch combination on you, but he also keeps it on the outside opposed to getting into the inside with you. And then on top of that, he knows how to slip out as well. And I will say, when it comes to cutting angles, using footwork, and all that type of stuff, I would give the edge to David Morrell. As far as boxing ability, I would give it to David Morrell. If we're talking about power and speed and all the physical attributes, that goes to David Benavidez, in my opinion. Now, the other thing about David Morrell is with David Morrell, I mean, the guy has like sniper shots. Even though he can land a 4 or 5 punch combination, a lot of his knockouts have came from one punch, 1 or 2 punches, just 1, 2 quick sniper punches, and then those guys are down on the ground. I mean, David Morrell and David Benavidez, they're very, very similar. They have different skills, but they're very, very similar. If you go and you watch David Morrell's fight, he pushes the pace exactly how David Benavidez does. Once he starts pushing the pace, once he gets on his roll, once he gets his accuracy down, the hand speed, the power, all of that, it's hard to stop both of these guys, but they fight so differently. With David Morrell, it's all about gaining physical attributes. It's all about bringing his opponent to deep waters as rounds progress. For David Morrell, it's all about outboxing his opponents and finding the right time to strike and land that KO punch. And I feel like this is going to be a very, very interesting matchup when it comes to these two guys because with everything on the line and all the stakes that are on the line and the way that these two fight, I think we're going to get a great fight. Me personally, as far as the fights that I've graded and me and Breezy have graded earlier for season 4, I think this fight has a chance to become number 1. But it's all about how the result is going to turn out. Now, the weaknesses for David Morrell, again, like I said earlier, he is not battle tested. You know, like I said, his opponents are not David Benavidez. And you could argue that David Benavidez has fought some fighters that are potentially better than David Morrell. He beat Andrade. He beat Caleb Plant, Darrell, he's beaten former world champions, David Morrell can't say that he has. And David Morrell can't say that he has fought guys who are on the same caliber as David Benavidez. And I already know there's going to be some fact checkers in the comments. And please, if I was wrong about David Morrell not beating any champions, any world champions, please put that in the comments. But overall, you can't lie to me and say that a lot of these guys that David Morrell has fought, only 11 fights. You can't lie to me and say that those guys even equal David Benavidez. The other thing about David Morrell is he also drops his hands a bit. I mean, after he's done landing his combos, he drops his hands. And I feel like in this fight, I feel like both of these guys are going to have the opportunity to knock each other out. And you want me to be honest? I do think this fight is going to end in a knockout. With the way that these two drop their hands, there's no way this fight doesn't end into a knockout with all the bad blood. I mean, there's guys who pretend to have bad blood to get publicity and get the attention on the fight. These guys, I think, got real bad blood. And I feel like when they both step into the ring February 1st, they're both looking to kill each other. There's no love lost between these two. I mean, we're gonna find out who the better David is. That's the truth. That is the result at the end of this fight. No matter who wins, we're gonna find out who the better David is. So, as far as keys, what does Benavidez have to do to win this fight? Well, I think Benavidez, he has to test him. I don't think David Morrell has been tested yet. David Morrell has not been tested yet. He hasn't had a close win. He hasn't been into a position where he almost suffered a loss. He hasn't been knocked down to my recognition or to my knowledge. He hasn't been knocked down. So he hasn't been tested. So I think that's the first thing. David Benavidez needs to test him. We've seen David Benavidez get tested before. We've seen him get knocked down and get back up. We can't say the same thing for Morrell. Can Morrell take the power and the speed of David Benavidez? The other thing that I think David Benavidez needs to do is fight him on the inside. I think David Benavidez is the best when he's fighting on the inside because that's his bread and butter. That's where all the power comes from. That's where he's able to sneak in those body shots, to sneak in the hooks, to get the uppercuts and to level change. I feel like he does that best when he is on the inside. So I think that if David Benavidez is going to win this fight, his best chance is on the inside. And last but not least, cut the ring. Like I said, David Morrell is very good at moving around. He's got quick feet. He's got quick speed. I mean, overall, the guy can cut angles, like I said. So you have to cut the ring. I feel like if David Benavidez can cut the ring and kind of surround David Morrell, I feel like we're going to get a masterclass of a beating from David Benavidez. Now, what does David Morrell have to do to beat David Benavidez? Well, box on the outside. That's the first thing. I don't think anybody should be in the pocket with David Benavidez. I'm going to say this right now. I don't think Canelo should be in the pocket with David Benavidez because that's where David Benavidez thrives. And I believe that if you're going to beat him, you're going to have to box him on the outside. A lot of these guys, if you go and you watch the fights where David Benavidez had a little bit of trouble or guys were able to tee off on him, they didn't stick into the pocket with him. They would tee off their 4 or 5 punches. They would throw him in bunches, which I think is another thing that David Morrell has to do. But they would also slip out. They wouldn't give David Benavidez the time. They wouldn't stay in the pocket too long for David Benavidez to counterpunch. And when they did, he took advantage of that. You have to box him on the outside. I think if you could find a guy who could box David Benavidez on the outside and show him that they demand respect and their power demands respect, I believe that you have a chance of beating David Benavidez. The other thing that I think that Morrell needs to do is use his footwork. Cut those angles. Present a look that David Benavidez hasn't seen before. He fought guys like Andrade. He's fought guys like Caleb Plant, but present a look that he hasn't seen before. Be the quicker opponent. Be the faster opponent. Force David Benavidez to use his boxing skills because, like I said, I don't think he's completely fundamentally down yet. He still has a little bit of a wide stance. He doesn't use his jab a lot. The head movement is progressing, but it's not there. I do believe we're going to see a better version of David Benavidez, but to say that we're going to see the most polished version of David Benavidez, like this is 100% his complete form, I don't think that's what we're going to see. I do believe that we're going to see some holes in David Benavidez' game that David Morrell can capitalize on. The question is he going to capitalize on it? And last but not least, counterpunch him when David Benavidez goes to the body. Like he drops his hands every single time he goes to that body. He loves going to that body. He loves pulling that punch, making it look like an uppercut and sneaking it to the body. So when you start seeing David Benavidez drop that hand, you check hook him. That is how he got knocked out, and that's how you're going to do it again. Okay, make sure, and on top of that, as long as you keep on check hooking him, as long as you keep on counter punching him when he goes and does that, he's going to have to kind of figure out a different way to go to the body, or he's going to have to think more. And I think that's the way you're going to beat David Benavidez. So, with that being said, now that we got all their strengths, weaknesses, and keys to victory out the way, let's go to betting odds. As of right now, David Benavidez is the favorite at minus 196, while David Morrell is the underdog at plus 150. So, overall, the odds are very close right now. Now, the most favorable outcome is David Benavidez winning by points or decisions at plus 120. And besides a draw, the least likely outcome is David Morrell winning by KO or TKO. So as I said, I believe this fight is going to end in a knockout or a TKO, and I believe it's going to happen around the eighth or ninth round. But if you ask me, I think we are going to see a David Benavidez knockout in the ninth round. I think the way it happens is I think he's going to kind of push the fight, and I feel like as it goes into deep waters, I feel like we're going to see Morrell have his moments, but then we're going to start seeing Morrell slowly start kind of curling up, slowly start realizing that the pressure might be a little bit too much. And then come the ninth round, I think David Benavidez is going to finish him. He might knock him down with a hook or an uppercut, maybe a body shot. He knocks him out, but I don't think he's going to completely knock him out. I think he's going to knock him down. Morrell's going to get back up. He's going to basically TKO him, and the ref is going to stop the fight. So, in my opinion, I got David Benavidez by ninth round TKO. But overall, I wouldn't be surprised if Morell knocks him out. Either way, this fight is ending in a knockout. The way these two have been talking, the way that these two have been coming at each other. I mean, Benavidez had the shove, and then Morell threw his title at him. I mean, overall, there's a lot of bad blood and a lot of animosity between these two guys. They don't like each other at all. It's hard for me to look at these two and all the bad blood and the animosity and be like, oh yeah, this is going to go 12 rounds. It's not. Somebody is getting knocked out. And if they don't, I'll come right back onto the podcast and I will fully apologize for losing a lot of people money. But I believe that David Benavidez is going to win by ninth round TKO. I once betted against David Benavidez. I thought Andre was going to beat him because he was the more polished boxer. Boy, was I wrong. But let me tell you something right now. Regardless of how this ends, we might be getting fight of the year. And I think that's the reason why you need to tune in February 1st, Las Vegas, Nevada. T-Mobile Arena, David Benavidez versus David Morrell. Who is the better David? And we're going to find that out. Who will get the next shot at the Undisputed Light Heavyweight Championship? And are they ready for it? All those questions are going to be figured out after this fight. And with that being said, we're just going to have to wait and see till February 1st. You know, this is going to be a very, very great fight. And I can't wait for it, me personally. I can't wait to come back on this podcast and talk about it. I can't wait to watch this fight. I think it's going to be a great fight. And I think everybody who tunes into it, they're going to get their money's worth. So with that being said, make sure y'all continue to tune into the Puncher's Point. You know, make sure y'all continue to tune into the social medias, the past videos that we made, all the interviews that we've done, the social media content. Make sure y'all tune into the podcast. You know, if y'all can't access YouTube at your work or when you're home or something like that, make sure y'all pop an earbud in if you can and listen to the podcast. You know what I'm saying? Overall, the Puncher's Point, we're doing big things. You know, we're trying to get bigger and better. And overall, if you're tuning into the Puncher's Point for the first time, welcome. And this is the perfect time for you to tune in. So with that being said, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.